Chapter 1. A Quiet Life. William Hart preferred silence. Not the awkward kind that made people shuffle or fill it with meaningless chatter, but real silence. The kind that let him hear the scratch of his pen, the hum of his computer, the whisper of his own thoughts as they stretched across the page. To the rest of the world, he was William Hart, the elusive best-selling romance author whose novels filled airport bookstores and book club tables across the country. To everyone who actually knew him, which was a very small circle, he was just Billy. Billy Hart, the man who lived on the second floor of a brownstone across from the park. The man who worked out every morning at 7 a.m., brewed exactly 1 cup of coffee afterward, and then spent the rest of his day locked away in his home office, writing about love stories he wasn't sure existed anymore. It wasn't that Billy didn't believe in love, not exactly. He wanted to believe in it. He just hadn't seen much evidence outside the pages of his books. His current evidence of not love, or at least not the kind that respected property leases, came in the form of Jack Hastings, his soon-to-be ex-roommate. "Come on, Billy, it was one party," Jack pleaded, still bleary-eyed from the night before. The faint thump of bass still echoed somewhere in Billy's skull. "One party," Billy repeated flatly, holding up a cracked lamp. "This is from your last one party." Jack grimaced. "I'll pay you back." "I don't need your money," Billy said calmly. "I need sleep. And quiet. And preferably neighbors who don't think I run a fraternity." Jack groaned, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're seriously evicting me?" Billy nodded, matter of fact. "You can leave quietly, or you can leave with help." Jack blinked. "Help? The police." The fight drained out of Jack like air from a balloon. "Right. Quietly it is." By the time Jack left 2 days later, muttering something about Billy being a romantic monk, the apartment looked like a hurricane had passed through. Beer bottles, crumbs, something sticky on the floor he didn't want to identify. Billy sighed and rolled up his sleeves. He wasn't angry, just tired. Tired of noise. Tired of people who mistook peace for loneliness. Over the week it took to restore order, he found himself thinking maybe it was time to give up on roommates altogether. He didn't need the money. Between royalties, advances, and foreign sales, he was financially secure enough to retire if he wanted. Not that anyone would ever guess. His 8-year-old Honda sat faithfully in its parking spot. His wardrobe consisted mostly of t-shirts and jeans, and his only suit hung and used in the closet, the one he'd bought for his uncle's funeral 3 years ago. He lived simply, quietly, comfortably invisible. Every month, his parents called, his mom to ask when he was bringing a nice girl home, and his dad to ask if he was still hiding behind that laptop. He always laughed them off. "Oh, you'll meet someone eventually," his mom said cheerfully on their last call. "You're such a catch, tall, handsome, and you've got a good heart." Billy smiled at that. If only good hearts were what people looked for these days. Still, the silence of his apartment was heavier now. He'd gotten used to another presence, even if it had been a frustrating one. Maybe having someone around wasn't such a bad thing, as long as they didn't throw parties or mistake his living room for a dance floor. So one night, between editing chapters and making tea, he pulled up a rental website and typed out a listing. Room available, quiet, spacious, park view. $300 per month. Utilities included. Must like silence. He hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. That's going to attract the wrong kind of attention, he thought. Too cheap, too vague. People would assume it was a scam. Then again, maybe that would scare off the wrong ones and attract the rare right one. He hit post. And for the first time in a while, he leaned back and wondered what it might be like to have someone around who didn't interrupt his peace. Someone ordinary, kind, grounded. He didn't know it yet, but he'd just opened the door to the story he'd been unknowingly waiting to write. That night, Billy couldn't sleep. He sat by his window, looking out at the park, the city lights glowing through the trees. Somewhere, a couple laughed softly as they passed beneath his window, hands brushing together. He smiled faintly. "Good for you," he murmured. Then, with a quiet sigh, he went back to his desk, where an unfinished manuscript waited. The love story of 2 strangers who found each other when they least expected it. Funny thing about writing fiction, he thought. Sometimes, it started sounding a lot like foreshadowing. Chapter 2. The empty room. The apartment was too quiet. Billy didn't realize how much background noise Jack had provided. The clatter of late-night snacks, the muffled TV through the wall, the occasional thump of bad music, until it was gone. Now, the silence pressed against him like soft weight. Even the refrigerator hum seemed too loud. He stood in the doorway of the freshly cleaned second bedroom, the one that had just been vacated, arms crossed, taking in the emptiness. The sunlight from the big front windows spilled across the hardwood floor, warming the space. It was a nice room, almost too nice to stay empty. The park view across the street gave it a tranquil charm, and for a moment, he imagined someone sitting there, reading, or maybe painting, or tending a few houseplants. He could almost see it, laughter drifting from this room into his own. He shook the thought away. "You're getting sentimental, Hart," he muttered to himself. But he left the door open when he walked away. By midweek, his inbox had exploded. Over 40 messages about the listing. Half of them were people trying to sell something. Another chunk were college students hoping to throw exactly the kind of parties he was trying to avoid. "Hey bro, is this place chill with music and guests? Asking for me and 3 of my boys LOL. Is the 300 a typo, or are you secretly a serial killer LOL? I have 2 cats, a boyfriend, and a small drum kit, but I'm quiet otherwise. Delete, delete, delete." He sighed and took a sip of his coffee, staring at the screen like it had personally offended him. Maybe I should just get a cat, he said under his breath. He was still scrolling when his phone buzzed with a new call. The number was local, unfamiliar. He almost ignored it, but something made him swipe to answer. Hello. Hi, is this Mr. Hart? The voice on the other end was female, warm, slightly cautious, like she wasn't sure whether to trust the number. This is Billy Hart. Yes, he said. You're calling about the listing? Yes. My name's Brooke Stevens. Her tone carried a faint smile when she spoke, polite, measured, curious. I saw your ad, and, well, it seems too good to be true. I wanted to check if it's real before I get my hopes up. Billy chuckled softly. It's real. I assure you, I'm not a scammer. Or a serial killer. That's exactly what a serial killer would say, she teased lightly. He liked her already. They talked for nearly 20 minutes. Billy explained the space, the rules, quiet hours, no big parties, shared kitchen, rent due on the first, that sort of thing. Brooke asked practical questions. Utilities, lease terms, if she could bring her own furniture, and whether he'd be okay if she worked from home part-time. Everything about her was normal, refreshingly so. At one point, when he mentioned he was a writer, there was a brief pause. What kind of writer? She asked. He hesitated, as he always did. Fiction, he said vaguely. Anything I might have read? Probably not, he said, smiling to himself. But if you have, I'd never admit it. She laughed, a soft, genuine sound that warmed something in him. By the end of the call, she agreed to come see the apartment the next afternoon. Just so you know, she said before hanging up, I'm bringing my don't get murdered instincts with me. Please do, Billy said, grinning. It's good policy. That night, he actually cleaned. Not the functional, surface-level cleaning he usually did, but the kind of cleaning you do when you realize someone else might see how you live. He scrubbed the counters, polished the marble wraparound in the kitchen until it gleamed, and even vacuumed his home gym. By the time he finished, it was almost 2 a.m. He collapsed onto the couch, staring up at the ceiling. You're cleaning for a stranger, he muttered. What's wrong with you? But deep down, he knew. It wasn't about the mess. It was about the possibility. The simple, human hope that maybe, just maybe, the right person might finally walk into his story. The next day, the city was unusually bright for autumn, golden lights spilling through the park trees, scattering over the street like spilled honey. Billy stood by the window, watching as a figure crossed the road, a woman in a navy jacket, carrying a folder and a cautious kind of energy. Brooke Stevens. He didn't know it yet, but this was the moment his quiet life began to change, not with fireworks, not with fate's grand gesture, but with the sound of soft knuckles tapping gently on his front door. Chapter 3, Brooke Stevens. Brooke Stevens wasn't naive. She'd lived in the city long enough to know that when something sounded too good to be true, it usually came with a catch, like a hidden mold problem, or a landlord who forgot to mention the pet snake in the basement. Still, the ad had caught her eye. $300 for a room that faced the park? Utilities included? Either the guy was lonely, hiding something, or terrible at math. Probably all three. And yet, as she crossed the street toward the brownstone, something in her chest buzzed. That cautious hope you get when life might be about to hand you a stroke of luck. The building was beautiful. Clean, classic, solid. The kind of place where you felt safe just walking up the steps. She took a breath, squared her shoulders, and knocked. The door opened after a few seconds, and there he was, William Billy Hart. Tall, broad-shouldered, calm in a way that instantly disarmed her. His t-shirt fit a little too well for someone who claimed to be a writer, and his voice, when he spoke, was low and warm. Brooke Stevens? She nodded, gripping the folder in her hands like a shield. That's me. He stepped aside, gesturing her in. Come in. Don't worry, I left my serial killer mask in the laundry. She blinked, then laughed before she could stop herself. Good to know. The apartment was bright, open, and surprisingly homey. Not what she expected from a man living alone. The marble wraparound counter divided the kitchen from the living room, sunlight bouncing off its surface. A row of neatly stacked books lined one wall, and on the other side, a door stood slightly open, revealing a tidy desk and a large monitor. You keep it clean, she said, scanning the spotless space. He smiled faintly. Occupational hazard. What do you write again? Fiction. He hesitated just long enough for her to notice. Romance, mostly. That threw her. Romance. Like, the kissing and feelings kind, or the shirtless pirate on the cover kind. Billy chuckled. Definitely the first one. That's actually kind of sweet, she admitted, cheeks flushing. He gestured toward the hallway. Would you like to see the room? Yes, please. I brought my checklist. Of course you did. The spare bedroom was even better than she'd hoped. Wide windows faced the park, flooding the space with natural light. You could practically smell the trees through the glass. She turned a slow circle, already picturing her desk in one corner and a few plants near the sill. This is really nice. You could charge double for this. He shrugged. It's not about the money. I just like having someone around occasionally, someone quiet, preferably. And I like knowing the person's not going to host raves. Ah, she said, smiling. So that's the story behind the low rent. He nodded. My last roommate thought we lived in a nightclub. I assume he's gone now. Evicted. Harsh. Necessary. She studied him then, really looked at him. He wasn't shy, but there was a quiet restraint in everything he did. He moved deliberately, spoke honestly, and somehow, that made her feel safe. They sat at the counter afterward while he brewed coffee, black for him, sweet and light for her. The conversation flowed easier than she expected. So, she said finally, you're just looking for someone who doesn't ruin your peace. Pretty much, he said. And someone who doesn't think I'm weird for liking silence. She smirked. Silence can be nice. Except when it's awkward. Good thing we don't seem to have that problem. She looked up, surprised, and found him smiling at her, just a little. It was disarming, that smile. It wasn't flirtatious. It was genuine. By the time she finished her coffee, she'd made up her mind. Well, she said, standing, you passed the checklist. No visible red flags, no weird stains, and you didn't try to sell me on a pyramid scheme. He laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I'll take the room, if you'll have me. I'd be glad to, he said. I'll email you the lease this afternoon. When she stepped out into the hallway, she turned back once more. He was still there, leaning against the counter, calm and thoughtful, like someone out of, well, one of those romance novels she'd never admit she read. Something in her stomach flipped, though she told herself it was just nerves. After all, it was just a room. Just a roommate. Just a little quiet company, right? Chapter 4, Coffee and Interrogations. Moving day arrived on a bright Saturday morning, the kind that made even the city seem a little less impatient. Brooke arrived in her small hatchback, trunk packed to the brim, followed closely by her two best friends, Rose and Janet. Rose was the kind of woman who could make friends in a checkout line, tall, sharp-featured, with jet black hair that fell like silk. She had an easy laugh and a mischievous streak that usually spelled trouble. Janet was her opposite in every way, strawberry blonde, blue-eyed, calm on the outside, with a brain that could run circles around most people. She had a habit of asking questions that made everyone in the room just a little uncomfortable, then smiling like she'd done nothing wrong. Together, they were the unstoppable duo who'd seen Brooke through every bad date, every apartment move, and every life crisis disguised as a haircut. So, naturally, they weren't about to let her move in with a stranger without a full-scale investigation. Billy met them at the door, polite as ever. Hi, he said, holding it open. You must be the friends. Rose's eyes flicked up and down, taking in his height, his calm expression, and the muscles that peeked through his plain t-shirt. You're the landlord? Roommate, Billy corrected. Landlord sounds old. Uh-huh, Rose said, unconvinced. You sure this isn't some weird sugar daddy arrangement? Brooke groaned. Rose. What? Rose shrugged. I'm asking the hard questions. Billy chuckled quietly. I can assure you, I'm not a sugar anything. Janet tilted her head. So what do you do, Billy? I'm a writer. Oh, Rose perked up. Like blogs or books? Books, he said simply. What kind of books? Janet asked, her tone innocent, which was never a good sign. Billy hesitated only a moment. Romance. There was a beat of silence. Then Rose blinked. Wait, you write romance novels? Brooke, trying not to laugh, piped up. He's actually pretty successful. Rose smirked. Successful how? Billy shrugged modestly. A few bestsellers. Nothing crazy. Janet leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Wait, what's your pen name? He hesitated. Then, softly, William Hart. Rose's jaw dropped. You're William Hart? My mom reads your books. Billy looked faintly horrified. Oh dear. Brooke burst out laughing. After that, the interview shifted gears into full-blown curiosity. Rose peppered him with questions about inspiration, research, fan mail, and love scenes. Janet wanted to know if he believed in soulmates. Brooke wanted the floor to swallow her whole. So, Rose leaned on the counter, eyes glinting. You write about romance. You must be a heartbreaker in real life. Billy smiled faintly. Not really. Janet, ever the strategist, asked. Girlfriend? No. Ever had one? Billy's voice stayed calm. No. Rose blinked. Like never. He shook his head. Never. Janet raised an eyebrow. And, forgive me if this is too personal. You're not married, right? He smiled, amused. No. Rose's jaw dropped. Wait, you're telling me a 6-foot, nice, romantic novelist is single and never been with anyone? Correct. Janet sat back, stunned. You're a unicorn. Billy chuckled softly. Or maybe just patient. Patient, Rose repeated. He nodded. I don't believe love is something you chase. It's something you recognize when it finally shows up. That silenced them. Even Rose looked momentarily thoughtful. Brooke, standing beside him, watched the ease with which he spoke. No embarrassment, no bravado. Just quiet conviction. He didn't wear his beliefs like armor. He wore them like truth. Eventually, the interrogation shifted back to lighter things. Billy made coffee for all three, black for himself, extra cream for Brooke, 2 sugars for Rose, and 1 for Janet after a quick negotiation. Rose wandered the living room, studying the bookshelves. You've got, like, every Jane Austen novel here. Occupational inspiration, he said. Any favorites? He smiled. I like Persuasion. It's about timing, and how sometimes, love comes back around. Rose grinned. You're seriously making the rest of us look bad. Brooke snorted. Trust me, I already feel like I'm living in one of his chapters. Billy turned to her, mock serious. Hopefully not one of the tragic ones. She met his gaze, and for a heartbeat, the air shifted. Then Rose clapped her hands, breaking the moment. Well, William Hart, romance author and alleged monk, you pass. You're not creepy, you make good coffee, and you haven't hit on any of us. Yet. I'll take that as a glowing review, he said, dryly. Janet grinned. Just don't hurt her, and we won't have to bury you in the park. Billy smiled. Duly noted. By the time the sun dipped low, the apartment was alive again. Boxes half unpacked, laughter echoing off the walls. Brooke felt a warmth she hadn't felt in months. When Rose and Janet finally left, promising to check in soon, and probably unannounced, Brooke sank onto the couch with a sigh. Billy stood at the counter, pouring himself a glass of water. Sorry about them, she said. They mean well. Mostly. He smiled. I like them. You did? They care about you. That says something. Brooke smiled, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. Yeah, they really do. For a moment, they sat in companionable silence, the city's evening hum drifting through the open windows. Then Billy said softly, You'll fit in here just fine. Brooke looked at him, and for the first time, she believed him. Chapter 5. Settling in for the first few weeks, Brooke felt like she was living with a ghost. Not in a scary way, more like a quiet presence that drifted in and out of rooms without ever making a sound. Billy Hart had the remarkable ability to exist without disrupting anything. He didn't hover, didn't pry, didn't even ask where she went when she left. But every morning, like clockwork, she heard faint music from his home gym, something instrumental, rhythmic. By the time she made coffee, he'd be showered, dressed, and typing in his room with the door half closed, a mug at his elbow. He wasn't reclusive. He was intentional. Everything about him was measured, deliberate in a way that made Brooke oddly comfortable. The chaos of her old apartment, roommates arguing over chores, noise, constant visitors, felt like a lifetime ago. Here, the quiet wasn't suffocating. It was peaceful. Sometimes, when she came home from work, she'd find him in the kitchen stirring pasta or sautéing vegetables, always with a small nod of greeting. They fell into a rhythm without ever discussing it, a domestic truce built on shared respect and unspoken understanding. It wasn't long before she started noticing things. The way he paused before speaking, like he was weighing his words. The way he looked people in the eye when they talked, really looked. The way he never bragged about anything, not even when she found out that one of his novels had spent 14 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. When she discovered that by accident, spotting a framed article tucked behind a plant, she'd confronted him about it. You're seriously famous, she said, pointing at it. Billy glanced up from his laptop. Famous people get recognized at grocery stores. I still get asked if I want paper or plastic. So, humble and funny, she said. You're just checking every box. He smiled. I'm just trying to be normal. You're doing a terrible job. He laughed then, really laughed, warm and low. Brooke didn't realize how much she liked the sound until it faded. They had dinner together once or twice a week, by accident more than planned. One night, they both reached for takeout menus at the same time. I was going to order Thai, she said. Perfect, he replied. 2 orders it is. Another night, they ended up watching a movie on his living room projector, an old black and white film she'd never seen. Halfway through, she'd asked, You actually enjoy this stuff? He smirked. I write love stories for a living. I'm contractually obligated. She threw a pillow at him. By the end, she was curled up at the far end of the couch, trying not to notice how close they were. The quiet between them wasn't awkward. It felt safe. It was about a month in when she realized something had shifted. She came home late one night after a long shift at work, tired, frazzled, hungry, and found a note on the counter. Dinner's in the oven. Don't argue. Be inside the oven was a plate of chicken and roasted vegetables, still warm. She stood there, staring at it, and for reasons she couldn't explain, her eyes stung. Nobody had done something like that for her in years. A few days later, she caught him mid-writing session. His door was cracked open, and she paused, curious. The sound of soft keystrokes filled the air, and she could see him hunched slightly forward, glasses slipping down his nose, completely absorbed in whatever world he was building. His fingers stopped suddenly. Then, without warning, he read aloud. She didn't know what love looked like, not really. But maybe it looked like someone saving her a place at the table, or leaving a light on, or asking if she got home safe. Brooke froze. The words weren't directed at her, but they hit somewhere deep, right between her ribs. She stepped away quietly before he noticed her, heart beating faster than it should. By the end of the second month, her skepticism had completely dissolved. Billy Hart was exactly who he said he was. No facade, no hidden agenda. Just a good man who loved quiet mornings, good coffee, and words. And maybe, she admitted to herself, she liked him more than she should. But he didn't flirt, didn't hint, didn't give her any reason to believe he saw her as anything other than a roommate. So she buried the feeling, told herself it was just admiration. That night, she lay awake, listening to the faint sound of typing from the next room, and smiled softly to herself. If she had to live with a ghost, at least it was one that made the world feel a little less lonely. Chapter 6. The dating experiment had started, like most disasters disguised as good ideas, with a bottle of wine and Janet's mischievous grin. Brooke, Rose, and Janet were sprawled across the living room late one Friday night. Billy had gone to bed hours ago, or at least, that's what Brooke thought until she heard the faint clacking of his keyboard behind his closed door. Rose was flipping through one of his books, dramatic as always. You know, she said, waving the paper back. If he writes love stories this good and he's never even dated, he must be some kind of alien. Janet smirked. Or a monk with Wi-Fi. Brooke rolled her eyes. He's just different. He doesn't fake things. That's rare. Uh-huh, Janet said, raising an eyebrow. And you just happen to light up every time he walks into the room? Brooke glared. Don't start. But it was too late. By the time the wine bottle was empty, Janet had launched her plan. It's simple, she said, grinning wickedly. Billy needs field research. Field research? Brooke asked. Rose nodded enthusiastically. For his books. You know, real-world romantic experience. You can't write about dating if you've never actually been on one. Brooke groaned. Oh no. No, no, no. We are not setting him up. Janet's smile widened. Who said anything about setting him up? He can go out with us. The room went silent. Brooke blinked. Us. Exactly, Janet said. One date with each of us. Purely academic. We'll call it research for his next novel. Rose clapped her hands. I love this plan. Brooke rubbed her temples. He's going to say no. Janet grinned. Then we just have to ask the right way. The next morning, the trio cornered Billy in the kitchen. He was mid-coffee, hair a little messy, glasses perched on the edge of his nose. Unfairly handsome for someone who'd clearly only slept 4 hours. Janet smiled sweetly. Billy, we have a proposal. He froze, mug halfway to his lips. That sounds ominous. Rose stepped in. We think you should go on 3 dates. He blinked. I beg your pardon. 3, Janet repeated. 1 with each of us. For research. You can write about it, analyze it, whatever helps your creative process. Billy stared at them like he was waiting for someone to yell April Fools. Is this a prank? He finally asked. Nope, Rose said cheerfully. A social experiment. Brooke folded her arms. I told them you'd say no. Billy's eyes flicked to her, and there it was, that small, unreadable smile. And if I don't? She faltered. You'd actually do it? He shrugged. I've done stranger things for a story. That's how it began. 3 dates. 3 very different experiences. 1 very confused writer. Date 1, Rose. Rose chose a rooftop bar with twinkle lights and a live jazz trio. She wore a red dress that turned heads and ordered drinks with names Billy couldn't pronounce. She was bold, bright, and loved making him squirm. So, she said halfway through. What's it like being a romance author who's never been in love? He met her gaze evenly. Peaceful. She laughed. That's kind of tragic, actually. He smiled. Maybe, but I like to think of it as waiting for the right story. For a moment, she forgot to tease him. There was something quietly magnetic about the way he said it. Not defensive, not ashamed. Just honest. When they parted that night, she hugged him and whispered, You're too good for this city, Billy Hart. He laughed softly. Don't tell anyone. I have a reputation to uphold. Date 2, Janet. Janet's idea of a date was a game night, board games, trivia, and a bottle of whiskey she'd claimed was for courage. From the start, she tested him. If you could only keep 1 book you've ever written, she asked, which would it be? He thought about it. The first one. It was terrible, but it reminded me why I started. She studied him. You really believe in this stuff, don't you? Real love. The forever kind. I do. You know that's rare, right? He nodded. That's why it's worth writing about. By the end of the night, Janet wasn't teasing anymore. She smiled at him across the table, softer than Brooke had ever seen. When she left, she told Brooke quietly, He's the real deal. No wonder you're in trouble. Brooke pretended not to hear. Date 3, Brooke. She tried not to overthink it. They went to a small Italian restaurant near the park. Candlelight, soft music, the kind of place where the world felt slower. He opened doors, pulled out her chair, even remembered she didn't like mushrooms. She tried to keep it casual, tried to remember it was all pretend. But when he looked at her, really looked, the air between them shifted. At one point, she laughed at something he said, and he froze, smiling softly like he was memorizing it. What? She asked. Nothing, he said. Just, that's my favorite sound. She forgot how to breathe. After dinner, they walked through the park under the streetlights. The city hummed softly around them, a blur of gold and shadow. Brooke stopped at the edge of the path, turning to face him. You know, this was supposed to be fake. He smiled faintly. I'm aware. So why does it feel not fake? He hesitated, then said quietly. Because sometimes the best stories start by accident. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then he took her hand, just briefly, just enough for her heart to stutter, and said, Thank you. For the research. She smiled, but the look in her eyes said something else entirely. Later that night, when Brooke climbed into bed, her phone buzzed. A message from Rose. Rose, so? Janet, did he kiss you? Brooke, no. Rose, are you okay? Brooke, no. She set the phone aside and stared at the ceiling. Outside, she could see the faint glow from Billy's room, his desk lamp still on, his silhouette bent over the keyboard. Maybe he was writing about her. Or maybe, for the first time, he wasn't writing at all. Chapter 7. Parent Trap. Had started as a joke. At least, that's what Billy told himself when Rose cheerfully announced, We're taking a road trip to meet your parents. He'd just come out of his office, still half lost in editing mode, when he found Brooke, Rose, and Janet sitting on his couch surrounded by shopping bags, snacks, and what looked suspiciously like a cooler. He blinked. You're what? Rose grinned. Meeting your parents. You said they keep asking when you're bringing a girlfriend over, right? Yes, but, then problem solved. Janet said, You're bringing 3. Brooke groaned. Guys, seriously, Rose held up a finger. Relax, Brooke. We're doing him a favor. He gets to stop the parental interrogation, and we get to see where the legendary William Hart came from. Billy pinched the bridge of his nose. This is either going to be the funniest day of my life or the end of it. 2 hours later, they were on the highway in Billy's 8-year-old Honda, which, much to Rose's dismay, smelled faintly of coffee and old paperbacks. Rose rode shotgun, fiddling with the radio. Janet and Brooke shared the back seat. Brooke, of course, had tried to opt out, but between Janet's "it'll be fun" and Rose's "you owe us for the research dates," she'd been outvoted. Billy drove in calm silence, eyes on the road. He didn't look nervous, just resigned. "Your parents are going to love us," Rose said, grinning. "They're going to have a lot of questions," he muttered. "About which part?" Janet teased. "The part where you write steamy romances but haven't dated anyone, or the part where you're bringing 3 women home?" Brooke snorted. "Can we not terrify his parents, please?" Billy gave her a grateful glance in the rearview mirror. "Thank you. You're welcome." Rose leaned over. "But seriously, Billy, if your dad asks, can I say we all met in a book club?" He sighed. "At this point, say whatever makes sense." Tom and Tina Hart lived in a quiet suburb just outside the city, a cozy brick house with rose bushes along the front walk. When they arrived, Tina was already waiting on the porch, waving enthusiastically. "Oh my goodness," she exclaimed as they stepped out of the car. "You didn't tell me you were bringing company." Billy opened his mouth to explain, but Tom appeared behind her, eyebrows climbing nearly to his hairline. "Son," he said slowly, looking at the 3 women. Are you hiring models now?" Brooke turned bright red. Rose tried not to laugh. Janet whispered, "Called it." Billy groaned. "Dad, no. These are my friends. This is Brooke, Rose, and Janet." Tina clapped her hands. "Well, aren't they lovely? Come in, come in." Dinner was chaos, the delightful, slightly awkward kind. Tina fussed over everyone, insisting they eat more, while Tom peppered Billy with teasing questions. "So," Tom said, carving into his roast chicken, "you've been holding out on us, huh? 3 beautiful ladies? Your mother's been praying for just one." Billy gave his father a withering look. "Dad," Rose smirked. "Actually, he's a perfect gentleman. He cooks, cleans, and respects boundaries. You raised him well." Tina beamed. "Oh, I like you." Janet leaned forward. "He also blushes when you compliment him, which is adorable, by the way." Billy's ears turned pink. Brooke had to bite her lip to hide her smile. Tom chuckled. "Careful, son, they're ganging up on you." After dinner, Tina insisted on showing them family photo albums, including one from Billy's awkward teenage years. Rose cackled at a photo of 13-year-old Billy with braces and a bad haircut. "Oh my gosh, he looks like he just discovered poetry and heartbreak on the same day." Billy groaned. "I can't believe you kept that one." Tina patted his shoulder. "It's my favorite." Brooke lingered over one photo, Billy at 18, smiling shyly next to his parents at his first book signing. There was something so earnest in his eyes, even then. "You've always been like this, haven't you?" she said softly. He looked at her. "Like what?" "Quiet, but all in. When you care about something." He hesitated, then smiled. "Yeah, I guess I have." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to fade to a hush around them. Later that night, when they were finally leaving, Tina hugged Billy tight. "You bring these girls back anytime, sweetheart," she said. "They're good for you." Tom leaned in conspiratorially. "Especially that Brooke one. She looks at you the way your mother used to look at me." Billy flushed. "Dad, what?" "I'm just saying, goodbye, Dad." On the drive back, the car was quiet. Rose and Janet dozed off in the back seat, leaving Billy and Brooke alone up front. For a while, they said nothing, just the hum of the tires and the soft rhythm of night traffic. Then Brooke spoke quietly. "Your parents are wonderful. They liked you," he said. "A lot." She smiled faintly. "Your dad thinks I'm in love with you." He glanced over, a slow, thoughtful smile spreading across his face. "Is he wrong?" She froze, caught between laughter and something deeper. "I don't know," she said honestly. He nodded once, eyes back on the road. "That's fair." They drove the rest of the way in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was hopeful. Chapter 8. Confessions and Crossroads. For the first time since moving in, Brooke avoided him. It wasn't obvious, at least, not at first. She still smiled in the mornings, still asked if he wanted coffee, still left notes when she ran errands. But there was a shift, subtle and sharp, like a missing heartbeat in an otherwise steady rhythm. And Billy, for all his patience and emotional restraint, felt it immediately. He'd grown used to her presence, the soft sounds she made when she cooked, the way her laughter drifted through the apartment, the quiet company she offered even when neither of them spoke. Now the silence felt heavier. He told himself not to overthink it. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she needed space. But every time he glanced at her closed door, he found himself staring a little too long. One night, as he sat staring at a blank document on his computer, he realized he couldn't write a single word. He'd been working on a new story, about 2 people who keep missing their chance to say what they really mean. And for the first time in years, the words refused to come. He pushed his chair back and rubbed his temples. It wasn't writer's block. It was Brooke. Everything he wanted to say on the page, he wanted to say to her instead. And that terrified him. Across the hall, Brooke was having her own battle. She sat on her bed, legs crossed, laptop closed, staring at the ceiling. She hadn't meant to pull away. Not really. But after that night at his parents' house, after he'd looked at her like that and asked if his father was wrong, something inside her cracked open. She couldn't stop thinking about it. And she hated that she couldn't stop. Because how could she fall for someone who didn't even know what falling felt like? How could she let herself hope for something that might never happen? She'd seen what love could do, how it could fade, warp, turn into disappointment. She'd sworn she wouldn't be the one waiting for someone to figure it out. So she'd started to build walls again, quiet, polite, invisible walls. But even from behind them, she could still feel him. It all came to a head on a Tuesday night. Billy came out of his office to find Brooke curled on the couch, reading one of his books, The Edge of Forever. He froze in the doorway. That's an old one. She looked up, startled. Sorry, I found it on the shelf. I hope you don't mind. He shook his head. Not at all. I'm just surprised anyone still reads that one. It's rough around the edges. She smiled faintly. I like it. The way you write about love, it feels real. Like it's not perfect, but it's worth waiting for. He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. Do you believe that? Her eyes flicked to him. I used to. There it was, the shift in her tone, the distance. He took a slow step closer. And now? She hesitated, closing the book. Now I'm not so sure. I think real love only happens in books. He smiled softly. You don't actually believe that. She looked at him then, frustration and longing flickering in her eyes. And what if I do? What if it's easier than hoping for something that doesn't exist? He stood there for a long moment, studying her. Then he said quietly, You sound like me before I started writing. That made her pause. What changed? He met her gaze, steady, sincere. I met someone who made me believe again. Her breath caught. Billy. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his warmth. You asked me once why I write romance if I've never been in love. The truth is, maybe I was always writing about you. Her heart stopped. You don't mean that. I do, he said simply. I just didn't realize it until now. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Brooke shook her head, voice trembling. You can't say things like that, Billy. You don't even know what this is yet. He smiled sadly. Maybe not, but I know how it feels. Her eyes glistened. You think this is easy for me? You think I want to feel this way? He reached out, not to touch her, just to bridge the space between them. Then don't run from it. But she stepped back, voice breaking. You deserve someone who isn't scared, Billy. And I don't know how to not be scared. And before he could say anything else, she grabbed her coat and walked out the door. The apartment felt impossibly quiet after that. Billy stood there for a long time, staring at the door she'd left through. Then he sat down on the couch, picked up the book she'd dropped, his book, and ran a hand over the worn cover. He flipped it open, reading the lines she'd been marking with her thumb. The bravest thing you can ever do is believe in love again, even when you don't know if it'll stay. He closed his eyes. Maybe that's what he needed to do now. Not write. Not wait. Believe. Chapter 9. Letters and realizations. Brooke hadn't planned to leave for more than a night. Just enough time to think, to breathe. But one night turned into two, and two into three. Rose and Janet didn't pry. They gave her space, bringing tea and sarcastic comfort in equal measure. Still, she could feel their questions hovering in the air. Finally, on the fourth morning, Janet said gently, You know you can't avoid him forever, right? Brooke sighed, staring at her untouched coffee. I just need to figure out what I'm doing. I can't go back there and pretend nothing's changed. Rose perched on the arm of the couch. Then don't pretend. Just be honest. That's easy for you to say, Brooke muttered. You're not the one who might have fallen for a man who doesn't even realize what he's feeling. Rose gave her a long look. Brooke, from what I've seen, he knows exactly what he's feeling. He's just waiting for you to believe him. That thought lingered in Brooke's mind for the rest of the day, until it grew too heavy to ignore. That night, she went back to the apartment. The lights were dim when she unlocked the door. The air felt still, like the whole place had been holding its breath. She half expected Billy to appear in the hallway, calm and unreadable as always. But the apartment was quiet. His office door was open, his laptop closed, his desk unnervingly tidy. And there, on the counter, was a single envelope. Her name written across it in his careful handwriting. Brooke frowned, heart fluttering. She hesitated, then opened it. Brooke, I wasn't sure if I should write this, but words are the only way I've ever known how to make sense of things. I don't know what I am to you right now. A friend, a mistake, a man who said too much. Maybe all three. But I do know this. You changed something in me that I didn't think could change anymore. Before you, love was just an idea. Something I wrote about because I wanted to believe in it, not because I'd ever seen it. You made it real. You made the apartment feel alive again. You made the quiet mean something. If I said the wrong thing, it's because I'm still learning what love sounds like when it's not on a page. If I push too hard, it's because I've spent so long dreaming of someone like you that I forgot how to be patient. But I don't regret a single word. Not one. You once told me that real love only happens in books. I used to think the same thing. But now I think maybe love is what happens when the story finally steps off the page. If you never come back, I'll understand. But if you do, I'll be here. Not writing. Not waiting. Just living. In case you ever decide you want to live here too. Billy. Brooke read it twice. Then 3 times. By the fourth, her vision was blurry with tears she didn't bother wiping away. He wasn't asking her to promise anything. He wasn't trying to convince her. He was simply telling the truth, in the only language he knew. And somehow, that was what made it hit hardest. The next morning, Brooke stood in the park across from the brownstone. The city was waking up, runners, dog walkers, people rushing to catch the bus. She just stood there, clutching the letter, watching the light hit the windows of the apartment that had, somehow, become home. Her heart ached in that way that meant she already knew her choice. She turned, crossed the street, and climbed the familiar steps. When she opened the door, Billy was there, standing by the counter, coffee mug in hand, as if he'd known she would come. He looked up, eyes tired but soft. Hey, hey. They stood there for a long moment. Neither spoke. The silence was fragile but warm. Then she set the letter down on the counter. You're a better writer than you think, you know. He smiled faintly. Occupational hazard. Brooke took a breath. I'm scared, Billy. I know, he said quietly. So am I. She looked at him, really looked, and realized that for all his calm, all his certainty, he was just as vulnerable as she was. Maybe that was the point. Maybe love wasn't about fearlessness at all, but about two people being scared together. She stepped closer, her voice soft. For the record, you didn't say the wrong thing. He tilted his head. No. She smiled, shaky but real. You just said it before I was ready to hear it. He exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders. And now? Brooke hesitated, then reached up, brushing her fingers against his cheek. Now I'm ready. He didn't move, didn't rush, didn't do anything except close his eyes and lean into her touch like it was something sacred. And then, gently, almost reverently, he kissed her. No fanfare, no cinematic music. Just two people finding something they'd both stopped believing in. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was enough. That night, Billy sat at his desk with a blank page open again, not to write, but to save the moment. He typed one line and stopped, smiling to himself. Sometimes, the best stories don't need to be written. They just need to be lived. Chapter 10, Happily, Ever After. The following weeks didn't feel like a fairy tale. They felt normal, and somehow, that made them better. Brooke still left dishes in the sink sometimes. Billy still disappeared into his office at odd hours, muttering about just one more chapter. They still tripped over each other in the kitchen and argued playfully about who drank the last of the coffee. But beneath all of it was something steady, something that felt like peace. For the first time in years, Billy didn't dread silence. Because now, the quiet wasn't empty. It was filled with her humming in the shower, her laughter drifting through the apartment, the sound of two mugs clinking together in the morning. It was the kind of love he used to invent on paper. Now he just had to live it. One late afternoon, as sunlight spilled across the marble counter, Brooke leaned against the kitchen island and smirked. So, Mr. Hart, she said teasingly, what's next for the world's most romantic shut-in? Billy looked up from his laptop, pretending to think. Laundry, probably. Then maybe taxes. Both have a tragic arc. She rolled her eyes. You're impossible. He grinned, closing the laptop. Actually, I do have something new. Her brows lifted. A new story? He hesitated, just long enough to make her curious. Sort of. Brooke folded her arms. Okay, author man. Let's hear it. He walked over, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. It's about this woman who moves in with a writer. He's boring, quiet, kind of a mess. Sounds riveting, she deadpanned. Oh, it is, he said, smiling. But here's the twist. Turns out, she teaches him that love isn't something you write about. It's something you build, one burned pancake and one late-night conversation at a time. Her voice softened. Does it have a happy ending? Billy looked at her for a long moment, his smile growing. I'm working on it. A few days later, Rose and Janet came over, carrying pizza and enough wine to fill a small pond. Janet smirked the second she walked in. So, this is what domestic bliss looks like. Don't start, Brooke warned, though her smile betrayed her. Rose winked at Billy. So, author boy, you finally figured out the difference between fiction and feelings. Billy chuckled. Working theory. Feelings are messier, louder, and occasionally steal your side of the bed. Brooke elbowed him lightly. You love when I do that. He caught her hand and kissed her knuckles. You caught me. Rose fanned herself dramatically. Ugh, he's disgustingly perfect. Janet raised her glass. To Brooke and Billy, the only man on earth who managed to fall in love without leaving his apartment. Brooke laughed, cheeks warm. You're not wrong. They all clinked glasses. The laughter filled the room like music, and Billy leaned back, taking it all in. The friends, the warmth, the woman who'd changed everything. Weeks later, Billy stood in front of a small crowd at a local bookstore, his first public appearance as himself. The banner behind him read, William Hart presents his new novel, The Roommate Who Wrote Love. He hadn't planned to publish it under his real name, but Brooke had convinced him otherwise. People should know who you are, she'd said. Not the name on the cover. You. Now, looking out at the audience, he saw her in the front row. The same calm smile she'd given him that first day she'd walked into his life, skeptical but curious. When the moderator asked what inspired his latest book, Billy paused, meeting Brooke's eyes. I used to think love was something you could write about, he said quietly. Now I know it's something you have to live, and be brave enough to share. The audience melted into applause. Brooke's smile was the loudest thing in the room. Later that night, back in the apartment, Brooke curled up beside him on the couch. Think you'll ever write another love story? She asked. Billy laughed softly. Maybe someday. But right now, I'm kind of busy living this one. Brooke rested her head on his shoulder, content. Good answer. He wrapped an arm around her, pressing a kiss to her forehead. The city lights blinked through the window, casting their reflections in the glass. Two figures sitting close, surrounded by books, laughter, and the quiet hum of something real. And for the first time in his life, William Hart didn't wonder if happily ever afters existed. He was living one. Epilogue. 6 months later, the Hart family kitchen was loud. Tina Hart had insisted on cooking everything herself, despite William's repeated offers to help. His father, Tom, had stationed himself at the grill, wearing a chef's hat that read Grill Sergeant. And in the middle of it all was Brooke, laughing, holding a tray of drinks like she'd been part of this family her whole life. Billy leaned against the counter, just watching. He'd seen this scene before, not this exact one, but versions of it. In his imagination. In his books. Moments of love, belonging, warmth. But this time, it wasn't fiction. It was dinner at his parents' house on a lazy Sunday in June. William, his mom called from the stove. Be a dear and tell your father that if he burns the chicken again, he's banned from grilling forever. Hey, Tom protested, flipping a piece of chicken with exaggerated skill. I'm a professional. Brooke giggled. Professional at what? Smoke alarms. Traitor, Tom said, feigning offense. I thought you were on my side. She shrugged. Sorry, but I'm with Tina on this one. Billy grinned. His parents adored Brooke. That much had become clear within 10 minutes of their first official visit. Tina had pulled him aside after dinner that night and whispered, if you let this one go, I'll disown you. He hadn't even considered it. After dinner, while his parents bickered lovingly in the kitchen, Billy and Brooke sat on the porch, the air warm and sweet with the smell of summer. Fireflies blinked lazily in the yard. Brooke tucked her legs under her and smiled. You know, your dad still thinks we're out of a movie. Billy chuckled. He asked me last week if Netflix was going to buy the rights to our story. She laughed, leaning her head on his shoulder. Maybe they should. I'd rather keep this one to ourselves. Even if it would make a good book, she teased. He tilted his head toward her, eyes soft. It already is. Brooke's heart did that fluttering thing she'd stopped trying to control around him. You really are impossible. Occupational hazard, he said again, smiling. After a while, she reached into her bag and handed him a small envelope. What's this? Open it. Inside was a plane ticket. He blinked. Paris. She nodded, looking suddenly shy. You once told me you've written about Paris a dozen times, but never actually seen it. So I thought, maybe it's time we fix that. Billy stared at her, and then at the ticket, and felt that familiar swell of disbelief that his life had somehow become better than anything he'd written. You know, he said softly, for someone who didn't believe in romance, you're kind of amazing at it. Brooke grinned. Maybe I just needed the right co-author. He smiled and kissed her, slow, sure, unhurried, like every word he'd ever written was now being rewritten with her name on it. Later, as they drove back to the city, the car windows opened to the warm night. Brooke looked over at him. Hey, Billy. Yeah. Do you ever miss being invisible? He thought for a moment. The city skyline glowed in the distance, and Brooke's hair fluttered in the wind. No, he said quietly. Not anymore. That night, back in the brownstone, Billy opened a new document on his laptop. Title, Love, Revised. Author, William Hart. But beneath it, for the first time, he added another line. Inspired by Brooke Stevens, the girl who made fiction real. He smiled, typed one sentence, and closed the laptop. Because the best love stories aren't written, they're lived. The end, maybe. Midnight in Paris, the city had gone quiet. Even Paris, the city that never really slept, had surrendered to the calm of midnight. From their tiny apartment balcony, William and Brooke could see the river glinting below and the Eiffel Tower's light sweeping slowly across the rooftops. The air smelled faintly of rain and warm bread from a late-night bakery somewhere down the street. Brooke leaned against the railing, a blanket draped around her shoulders. Billy stood beside her, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. Neither spoke for a while. They didn't need to. This, the silence, the nearness, the heartbeat of the city beneath them, said enough. Finally, Brooke turned her head, smiling softly. You realize this is the most cliché setting in the world for a romance writer, right? Billy chuckled. Clichés exist for a reason. Oh yeah? And what's that? He handed her the mug, his voice low. Because they're true. Brooke shook her head, laughing quietly. You and your poetic one-liners. He leaned closer, his shoulder brushing hers. You love my poetic one-liners. She smiled into her mug. Maybe a little. They watched the lights shimmer for a few more minutes before she spoke again. Do you ever think about how different your life is now? A year ago, you were hiding from the world. Now you're in Paris, surrounded by people who adore you. He looked at her, the faint light catching in his eyes. It's not Paris that changed things, Brooke. It's you. She blinked, the softness of his voice catching her off guard. Me? Yeah. He smiled. You made me believe that love isn't a fantasy. It's this. He gestured around them. The dim balcony, the rain-speckled air, her hand in his. Ordinary and impossible at the same time. Her throat tightened, a warmth blooming deep inside her chest. That's beautiful. I'm a writer, he teased gently. Occupational hazard. Brooke laughed, then reached up and kissed him, slow and sure, with the city breathing around them. When they finally pulled apart, the Eiffel Tower lights blinked again, as if on cue. Brooke rested her forehead against his. You know, she whispered, if you ever write about this, I want you to exaggerate the part where I kissed you first. He grinned. Deal. But only if I get to tell the truth in the sequel. She raised an eyebrow. Sequel. He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. Every great love story deserves one. They fell into a quiet laugh, The kind that only happens when two people are perfectly at peace. And somewhere below, a street musician began to play a soft melody on an old violin, the notes drifting up to meet them, weaving through the night like a whispered promise. Billy wrapped an arm around Brooke, pulling her close. "Midnight in Paris," he murmured. "Not a bad place for a happy ending." Brooke smiled against his shoulder. "Correction," she whispered. "Not an ending. Just another chapter." The lights shimmered once more, and the world, for that moment, felt exactly right. The end, truly this time.